CEO and publisher of the Fort Worth Report, and I just want to welcome you all here this morning to this beautiful space at the Martin Center. Texas Wesleyan has been a terrific partner with us in making this space available to us for our Candid Conversation events, and clearly this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in. When we started the Fort Worth Report almost a couple of years ago, I have this wonderful job of just talking to people in the community about what matters to them about Fort Worth, what are the most important issues that the community faces, how do we move forward in a positive, effective way. And it was fascinating to me in having all those conversations that the Fort Worth way came up a lot. It came up, and everybody who talked about it a little bit differently. And I said, well, that's fascinating. And as we started our Candid Conversation series, we thought we definitely wanted to have this be one of the topics. We've been doing the conversations now for about a year, and it's been this kind of turnout. Although I think this is our best turnout, so I think there's a lot of interest here. But I want to, before I get into anything else more, I want to make sure, along with thanking Wesleyan, thank our sponsors, because this free event happens only because of our sponsors. Our series sponsors, Fidelity Investments, Mental Health Connection, North Texas Community Foundation, Southside Bank, and the United Way of Tarrant County. So if we give them applause, please. And then our silver sponsors are our country home and the Real Estate Council of Greater Fort Worth. So thanks to them too. Now I want to just jump right into it. That's what you're all here for, and I want to introduce our moderator today, the incomparable Bob Ray Sanders. He led one of our conversations, our first one, a year ago this month, and it was, if you were here, it was a terrific conversation. So looking forward to this one too. Come on up, Bob. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
And it is a good morning, isn't it? By the way, there are a couple more seats at this table. There's some seats over here, so do you want to stand? I mean, I get it. You know what? I'm going to throw things off just a little bit, because as I was preparing for this, and I was thinking about Fort Worth, and I remembered the cities that have songs, you know, like I Left My Heart in San Francisco, New York, New York, Big D, Little A-double-L-A, Dallas, I mean, from the movie State Fair. Does anybody remember the Fort Worth song?
Fort Worth, I love you.
Fort Worth, I love you? Oh.
Fort Worth, it's a country in the western. Fort Worth,
and the mayor saying big balls in Cowtown. No. That's one of my heroes. Yeah. But no, there was actually a song called Fort Worth that was on the radio only for about 6 weeks. But it was there. Does anybody remember that? I mean, the mayor remembers it. This Fort Worth, go. This one, and I can't sing, so forgive me. Don't anybody run out of here. But the lyrics came to me, and I went looking for it, and I'm going to give this assignment to the Fort Worth Report. Find out who wrote this song and who sang it, because they played it on KXOL and KFJZ, the top 40 stations. Here's how it goes. I mean, these are the lyrics. Don't blame me. When I was just a little boy, my grandpa used to tell of Fort Worth in the early days. I know this story well, about Indian raids and cattle drives and the railroad coming to town. My, how the city's grown since Grandpa was around. Well, I'm talking about wonderful Fort Worth. Fort Worth. You get the idea. So I said I was right. I shouldn't have done that. I want somebody to find out who did it. I would try to Google last night and I couldn't find it. So It's not a big deal, AWA. Anyway. Yeah, we could not share a good song. Let me start by introducing our panel up here. Alex Jimenez, former Vice President of TXU. He's extremely active in both the Fort Worth and Dallas communities. In fact, Alex is the only person who served as chairman of both the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Dallas Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And he's also my neighbor, so be kind to him. The mayor, of course, Betsy Price. She has a resume longer than this room, but she was the mayor, in fact, the longest serving mayor in Fort Worth. Prior to that, she was county officer, elected officer, and she recently ran for county judge. What happened? Oh no. We're not going there. I just had to do that. Jennifer Treviño is executive director of Leadership Fort Worth, and prior to joining Leadership Fort Worth, Mr. Treviño served as Chief Development Officer of Girls Incorporated of Tarrant County and Vice President at UNT Health Science Center. She is also a certified diversity professional. And on the end is a person I've got to know well recently because he's so involved in everything. Dante is founder of Community Frontline. And if you don't know anything about it, you need to know something about it. In fact, they're dedicating a mural next week, I think it is, a tribute to Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs in Fort Worth. It covers a whole wall outside their building. The Frontline was formed in 2016 in the aftermath of the murders of Orlando Castillo, Alton Sterling, and other unarmed Black men, as well as the 5 police officers in Dallas who were ambushed a couple of years ago. The organization states that it wants to be a part of a solution and to initiate a long-term commitment to racial justice and healing. So let us begin. I gave our panel a warning of my first question because I was just interested to know if you could say it in 2 sentences, no more than 3. If you had to describe Fort Worth today to someone who's never been here, someone from out of state or from outer space, for that matter, how would you describe Fort Worth? And I'm going to begin with you, Jennifer.
There's benefit of going first, and there's disadvantages of going first. But first, I want to say good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity to be here with you all today. Lots of friends in the room, which I'll speak about later on as well. From my perspective, I think Fort Worth is an exciting city that has the potential to truly become a modern city if we will get out of our own way at times.
Okay. Even following your instructions too. I mean, I like that. Thank you. Okay, I go to you, Mayor.
Why would anybody not know Fort Worth? No, seriously, I would describe Fort Worth as it's the next big city, but we still have a small town, friendly, opening attitude. And I think people forget how diverse we are, both in racially diverse, but also in what's offered here, from Cowtown to world-class museums with Michelangelo's.
All right, Alex.
Partly what she said about it's a big city that still behaves like a small city. We're going to probably be bigger than Dallas in probably 20, 30 years population-wise. Land-wise, we're probably already there. But we need to start we need to start acting like a large city and holding people accountable. I don't think we do that very well in Fort Worth. And I'm talking about county level, city level, school board level. We can do a lot better than what we're doing and not waste time arguing with each other. So, let's go.
And Dante.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So similar, I want to say thank you guys for coming in and thank y'all for allowing me to be on the panel. But my answer to that question is similar to kind of what everyone else says. I think it's a big city, right? 13th largest, 12th largest city with a small town feel. Also full of potential. And just be careful of the false and broken promises that come along with some of that. So that would be my take on it.
Okay, well, that's a good start. So we know where we are about right now. So let me get to the question of the day, and Mayor, I'm gonna let you start with this one. How would you define or describe the Fort Worth way? Or what would you say is the primary perception of the phrase? Is it negative or positive?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask, if it's negative or positive. First, the Fort Worth way was not a term that I ever used. For me, it had a history that I wanted a community that was engaged, willing to tell their elected officials what they wanted and what they believed and what was important to them. Hence, that's why we were in the community so much for 10 years. And I didn't feel like that was the term that fit who we were. I used instead, it's your Fort Worth, let's make it better together. You can look back and see we used it's your Fort Worth a lot. But I think the Fort Worth way came about most likely, it depends on who you ask. People felt like it was a way for us to be collaborative and cooperative and listen to each other and not spend a lot of time arguing and not, getting your hackles up and not listening to other people. But in the last few years, it's really morphed over to a term that's become fairly divisive. I don't know that it has to be divisive. I think it can be a strong term, but we have to decide, is it a term that this community really wants used or is it not? Do we find a slogan that we think fits who we are now? Remember, we're a city that's better than 50% newcomers, not natives, to this community. And they need to feel as welcome and as easy and as comfortable and as listened to and engaged as natives do in Fort Worth. And they need to understand a lot of our history. But we also have to understand what it is they're looking for in this community and how we go forward. And the Fort Worth way can go either way.
Okay, Jennifer?
So I say it's often a way of doing business or making decisions for communities without always including the perspectives of those that our decisions are going to be affecting. So for example, no disrespect to my fellow colleagues or those of you who think that I am younger than I am, but there's no one up here that's representing under 40.
Wait.
I'm sorry, I'm aging Dante.
He just looks old.
My apologies. But I will say, in many rooms that I'm in, and many places I have been in the past, decisions are being made for 30-somethings, 20-somethings, K through 12 and up, or then younger, that are not necessarily represented at the table. And those voices need to be heard. I think we've also seen the Fort Worth way kind of come across as a good old boy system. Right. And that folks aren't at the table that should be, or if they are, it's from a check the box perspective, from a tokenism standpoint, not so much. And I can speak from that because I've been in those rooms. I also speak from that from the perspective of representing organizations. So I used to be the chair of the Hispanic Women's Network of Fort Worth chapter. And while it is a compliment to be seen as a strong pipeline of female leaders, so many organizations only reached out to us then when they needed, we need a Latina. We need more diversity. It was very transactional. Right. And I think that is one of the things that I want to see go away from Fort Worth, is from the Fort Worth way of it being transactional. Not just coming to communities when you need something, but building those relationships every day, all year. Because that's how I think 21st century leaders, that we say that's what we are, really are going to move this city forward, where we're not building those relationships once a year or every 2 years when it's election time. We're doing that work year in, year out. And I think all of us need to, and I don't have all the answers. I look at this and don't claim that in any sense, but from my experience, working on making sure, do our professional and our personal circles look like us? What are we all actively doing to make our networks diverse, so that when we are making decisions or we are in an opportunity to either bring somebody to the table or make decisions or recommend someone for an award or a position or even succession planning that happens more behind the scenes when it's even elected positions, that we're more inclusive in that sense. So that is what I'd like to see us move away from the Fort Worth way to something that's more progressive and more inclusive.
Okay, now to the senior citizen on the end.
I'm gonna be in trouble with that because he's also on my board, y'all. For a long time.
I will be 40 next month, though. So.
You were right.
I understand. And I agree with those sentiments in terms of what the Fort Worth way is. And so, I would sum it up like this: it's a system, right? So it's not even so much the wording of it or the saying of it; it's an actual system at play by the establishment, right? So, in who's the establishment? The establishment can be black, white, brown, whoever, but it's the established citizens of Fort Worth who create an agenda, and they choose what's best for them. Right? They choose who's the best people, who's the best action, what's the best take for their agenda, right? And their agenda doesn't necessarily have anything to do with diversity, equity, or inclusion.
Teach, bro.
And so we have to understand, so my understanding of it is it's more of the system issue than just the saying of it. Because even with Mayor, and you're right, you did change it a little bit when you said, it's your Fort Worth, right? And for me and the people that, we serve with Community Frontline, the neighborhood that I'm from, that was still a question mark. Was it my Fort Worth, right? And so I think same thing with the Fort Worth way. Is it the way of the people of Stop 6, Eastwood, Como, Southside? And what does that look like? Because for me, in almost 40 years, it looks the same, right? So for the last 40 years of my existence, being born and raised here, those sides of town, those communities, look and feel the same. So when I drove in from 820 down Rosedale, I didn't see much difference other than Calvert being demolished now, right? And so that's, for me, is a lot of what happens when you're dealing with a system, and how equity is not a part of that system and the people that's impacted by it. So the Fort Worth way to me is a system that's missing out on really including people and having people at the table, having people in those rooms. Again, even if it is, I know, and someone may speak to it up here, but even if it is a closed room and kind of closed setting, who's in that room? Who's in those settings? What voices are there to really impact and have change for the people that just haven't had change in this city? And for me, that's kind of what.
Wow. And Dante, when I first met you, I thought you were about 16. But I'm telling my age now, so I am the old man in the room, and I accept that. Alex?
Thank you, Bob.
I'm close to the mayor's age, though. I just want you to know that.
Actually, I think the same age.
I need to
Very young, right?
Let me ask this question first. Are there any attorneys in the house? I'm gonna need your help after this. I may step on some toes, but I want us to be uncomfortable when we leave here.
Okay.
I want us to leave here and think we need to do this again, where we can all talk to each other and listen to each other. But what I will say from this point forward is all with due respect. Okay? I agree with my panelists have said. Fort Worth Way has been, Moncrief, is the first time I heard it. He talked about how we get behind closed doors, handle situations, we don't argue in public. Well, maybe that worked at one time when we were 400,000 people. Now we're almost 1 million. But it didn't work that way anymore. And the problem is, I think Jennifer said it, and Dante, there's not diversity in those closed door rooms when they're making decisions. I think we're afraid of people who disagree with us. Now, I grew up with 8 sisters and 5 brothers. I wish we had a camera back then so we could have videotaped our Sunday lunch after Mass. When we fought, we argued, we screamed, but we loved each other. And we never left that house without having each other's back. And that's what I want the Fort Worth way to be. So with that, with all due respect, I brought some props. And when I was asked by Chris, I was reading the Dallas Morning News, and here's the headline: Leaders construct election fraud unit. This is our county, Tarrant County. The sheriff, the new county judge, and the new DA. Now, whoever picked him to do that, I guarantee there was only 3 people in that damn room. Okay? And here's the thing that really galled me about this. I'm going to give you a quote from this paper, and I don't always believe what I read, but I believe this. This is the Wade one. We're going to do the right thing every time. Bullshit. If he was going to do the right thing every time, do y'all realize there's been 15 folks in that jail that have died over the last couple of years? Is that the right thing? Come on, man. Do you know there was a lady that was in that jail, gave birth? Wow. They didn't know that for 2 or 3 days. Is that the right thing? That jail has lost its certification twice under this, I won't call him what I usually call him, but under the sheriff's tenure. So when I read he's going to do the right thing every time, I gotta say BS. So that's the county. Then you take it down to the school board. Did y'all read the other day about that we spent $2.6 million on a sex education program that's not certified by the Texas Education Agency? Now, if you read the paper and you read between the lines, they put that on the consent agenda. And if you don't know, and I'm going to give y'all some homework to go and check these things out. Who's responsible for the agenda at the school board? And to put something like that on the consent agenda, which could be 3 or 4 pages long sometimes, and the board just generally approve it, and then we all get mad at the board and the teachers. One of the saddest days I've ever had in Fort Worth was when there was teachers on one side of the street and parents on the other side of the street, yelling at each other, screaming at each other. And that's not the Fort Worth way. So we got to come together somehow and figure all this out. So back to the agenda. Check out who did that agenda and who's responsible for that agenda, putting that on the consent agenda. And then go back. They had a conversation back a few years ago where they came up with a new ethics policy at Fort Worth ISD. And it was transparent. People talked about it. They argued about it. We didn't need it, some said. Yeah, we do. Well, they passed it. Then who's ever responsible later for that agenda, on the consent agenda, they put on there to repeal that ethics policy they had just passed a year earlier. Now you go back and find out.
I'm going to stop you there and let you continue in a minute, but I want to get another question or two because I'm going to come to y'all in a few minutes and let you ask questions.
Can I just
Yeah.
to the city real quick?
Yeah.
I don't need them.
No, we're uncomfortable, so don't make us more uncomfortable. No, Brian, no.
Okay, well, check it out, okay? And then here's one, I'll give you this date. This is 4-Star Telegram. It's dated Friday, April the 19th, 2019. You guys go read that article and y'all make your own decision on what's happening. Friday, April the 19th, 2019.
Okay, you got your assignments? Well, no, I mean, well, the mayor suggested a minute ago that the fourth way means different things to different people. And I'm gonna tell you what a friend of mine says it means, and this friend, you can imagine, he's worse than Alex, is County Commissioner John Wiley Price. So you can, who calls Fort Worth the Aunt Jemima capital of the world. But he says the Fort Worth way means a group of white people go into a room, make a decision, come out and give it to a group of, quote, so-called black leaders who do what white people say do. How do you respond to that? And I'll pass it on to John, based on what you tell me. Yeah, let me go to the mayor.
Start with me, Bob Ray. You know, first I would say, this isn't Dallas. And John Wiley Price doesn't understand and isn't here on a daily basis. Now, I would say possibly a fair amount of what he said, I wouldn't put it as strongly as he did by any means. But 50 years ago, even probably 20 or 30 years ago, that may very well have been true. But I don't think you see that now. I think you see much more open and inclusive groups, respectful of each other. We worked hard on engaging this community at every level. Had a lot of town halls, a lot of meetings, had a lot of people. Estes headed our race and cultural task force that was very diverse. I just don't think that that is a correct description of Fort Worth in today's, are we perfect? No, we're far from it. We have a long way to go. But most people and most communities do have a long way to go. As far as younger people that Jennifer mentioned, that was the whole impetus behind starting Steer Fort Worth, was leaders under 40, to get them engaged and get them at the table. It's very hard as an elected official or as a business leader or chamber leader or who, to get people to come and serve. To find, you need a wide variety of people. I'm looking at this crowd here, and I can count about 20 of you who were willing to raise your hand to serve on committees. There are far too many people who want to complain and say this is meted out to us and handed out to us, but they don't want to be at the table answering and doing the hard work. I think that's opening. I think that's changing. I think a lot of our leaders are bringing people to the table now and saying, if you ever want to see it change, you have to step up and help us. We begin to get more and more people appearing at council and talking to us the last 4 years than we'd ever had before. And that's a good thing, to have citizens engaged and listening. But no, I don't agree with John Wiley's comments.
Yeah, and Pam, you don't have to wait on me to
All
call
right,
on you.
I do want to push back on you, Mayor, about that, because I had the opportunity to serve on numerous boards and commissions at the city level for 10 years straight, sometimes more than one. Because I had professional capital built up within my organization at UNT Health Science Center at the time, that understood it was good for me to be out in the community, that it was good for me to be in circles that my executive team and others weren't. I didn't have to take time off from work to attend a zoning commission meeting or city plan commission meeting. So I pushed back on that because not everyone has those opportunities. And it's the same push and pull we see in our community around time of day for city council meetings. It's the same thing you see and hear from some of our current city council members who are struggling to be husbands, wives, parents, working professionals, because even though the city council is technically a full-time job, we don't pay it like a full-time job. And so then that also creates barriers of who can actually run for office, who can afford to sacrifice that income potentially. When I ran for city council in 2017, I'll be honest, I had not figured that part out. My husband and I had some faith that we were going to figure it out if I was elected. But you create those barriers, so I do respectfully push back, because I got served for 10 years and finally said, it's time for other people to do it, and have encouraged others. We bring the city secretary to Leadership Fort Worth to talk about serving and being on those boards and commissions. But I think we also have to think about what everybody else is doing in this.
I think you're right, Jennifer, but there's still a small group And every organization that all of us belong to need to be encouraging people to volunteer and get engaged, so that we do build a bigger pool. And as far as this being, council being a full-time position, it is, and the pay is a significant issue, because the pay keeps far too many people from being able to serve. You don't want to pay people to be in it just for the money, but you also don't want them earning just enough that it pays their dry cleaning bill or their gas for a few months. Literally, I will give you an example, just a personal example. My husband was figuring some stuff recently, and in the 10 years I served, he said, if you'd stayed at the tax office as a paid county official, because it's more of a CEO position, you lost better than $2 million serving. My comment is always, it's not about the money. His comment is always, every time you say that in the last 50 years, honey, it just means I have to work a little harder. But I still have him after 50 years.
I remember when city council was paid $10 a meeting,
Yeah.
so.
25 for council and 29 for the mayor is still much better than it used to be, but
Right.
it's not, you can't get the right people, you can't get people to serve.
Yes, I just want to chime in just real quick. So one, JWP, this John Wally Price. So one, I got the braids, he got the braids. But I think there is some, there's some facts to what he's saying, right? In terms of, again, the establishment. So you have established white folks that get in contact with established black folks to make particular decisions that are believed to help the community at large, but ultimately they end up helping one or two or three, right? And so we get stuck thinking that because there are black people in a room or brown people in a room, that changes are being made, right? So the Race and Culture Task Force, that was a very good example of this happening, right? So you had Estrus, you had Barbara, you had all these individuals who were making good efforts to make good change, but when it got to the council, when it got to actually making the change didn't happen.
That's right.
Right? The change did not happen. The things that didn't actually come to fruition. So if we're talking about change, if we're talking about what actually happens, again, the false promises, and that's why I said what I said about people coming to Fort Worth. If you're coming, understand there's hope. There's going to be a lot of potential, right? Even with a new city council, we couldn't get an oversight for police.
That's right.
Right? Even though it was pushed, it was put on the agenda, there was a reason why that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? So even with good intentioned black folks at the table, and I'm saying black because I'm black and I'm black.
Go ahead.
Right? It's Black History Month. I just want to make sure we understand what actually happened. And again, what I'm saying is for the last 40 years, when I look at my city, when I look at my communities in which I grew up in, they feel and they look, and it's the same, right? And so when John Wally Price makes that statement, it's hard to push back against that statement when I've seen in my last 10 to 15 years of kind of being engaged in this process and seeing how the Fort Worth way and the system actually looks, works, and feels. It does feel that way, even though there may be instances of wins or things that kind of go a little different, and there could be some black folk getting some wins. By and large, the black community in this city is dead last. You look at economics, you look at education, you look at police encounters, look at the percentages, look at the numbers, right? So when we talk about equity, we talk about inclusion, we talk about those things, and then you say black people, we are dead last in the city of Fort Worth. I sit on the HRC, the Human Relations Commission. We were charged with taking over the Race and Culture Task Force initiatives, right? And we looked at the data, we looked at the numbers, and those numbers show that the black community in this city is dead last. So what are we doing about that when we have conversations with black folks at the table? Who's the one, who's the two that's making the decisions, and how does that trickle down and actually get to the rest of the community? So I agree with John Water because that seems to be the case, even though the folks in the room are well-intentioned. So it's not a knock on the folks in the room. Again, it's a speak to the system and how the system works and how the system has been a part of not moving a particular community forward within this city.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Dante, quickly before we go to Alice. On that issue of a community advisory board for the police department, Mayor, that's one time the city of Fort Worth did look like Dallas, because everybody who was for it happened to be, as Dante suggests, black, and there was one Anglo. Everybody against it were non-black. That looked a lot like Dallas, not today, but in the 90s, when all of their decisions were made based on race.
That's right.
And so I witnessed that, just an aside. But that issue's not dead. Believe me, it's not dead.
I don't think it's even started. I think what we need to talk about, I agree with everybody, the people who are in that room don't really represent the city. You know, just because you bring someone that's African American or Latino, it doesn't necessarily, they speak for the entire community, the African American community, Hispanic community. But what happens from what I've only lived here 40 years, Dante, so I was there when you were born. At the end of the day, we're conditioned. All of us are conditioned. I don't know if you guys ever, any of you in this room ever try to get someone from the city to come out on the city permit or come out. Man, it's like there is a law against them leaving City Hall. They won't get out. So, Fernando, if you could take it back to whoever, that make it a point that the people that work for the city, that are supposed to be helping the city, spend 5 hours a day on the north side, 5 hours, a week, 5 hours a week on the east side, on the north side, on the south side, on the west side, so they can really learn what these neighborhoods are going through. That's what I see. I see that we're conditioned to think that some of the folks that work at the city, that work at the Chamber of Commerce, that kind of supposedly lead the city, think the city limits end at I-35. And there's a whole lot of people living on east of 35. And you need to come out and visit us. And we're not all as bad as I am. There are some good people out here on the east side. I mean, we need to get out there and you need to do your business. But I've tried to help other folks. Hey, this person's got a problem. Can you come up? Oh, we can't go meet with you. I said, well, how do you run an outfit if you don't know, go see what the problems are? So that's what I think, Dante, is we're conditioned. And the folks that have come up are conditioned to think this is the way it's supposed to be. Now, I've been in meetings, we had breakfast one time with the mayor, and it was a fairly diverse group. It was only a few of us, and it's right when that Jacqueline Craig thing first happened, right after that. And there was an African-American pastor in that deal. When the mayor walked in, we all rose up and hugged her, and we all loved Betsy. But one thing that he said during that breakfast was, Betsy, it's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. It's those people. And this is an African-American pastor. So after the meeting, I kind of held back and asked him to stay. I wanted to say something to him. And I said, do you really think there's nothing wrong? He said, oh, no, we got. Well, you may want to leave with that next time, because it's not fair to the mayor for you to tell her everything's okay. She will, if you tell her what the issues are, she can deal with them. But if she's hearing from African Americans, she's hearing from Latinos that it's okay, then what would you think? You would do the same thing. You'd say, okay, things are okay. But I do believe that the issue, and we're talking about race, and I know John Wiley Price from my 12-year stint in Dallas pretty well, and he's a fair guy. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's everyone in this room's responsibility about, I don't like to use the word racist. I do use the word biased. I do use the word prejudiced. Everybody in this room, I'm prejudiced. I'm biased. Every one of us is. And it's a two-way street. I would ask my African American friends, here, outside, in the alley, wherever, what are you doing to help the situation? I would ask my Latina friend, what are you doing to help the situation? We ask the Anglo all the time, what are you doing to fix the situation? But I think it's incumbent on every single one of us to fix it. And to me, it's just working together, having respect for each other, and doing the right thing. The other thing is, I've gotten involved in education, and there is a heck of disparity in education. And every day I wake up, how am I going to help these kids learn how to read at their grade level? And I preach that all the time. I got 2 board members from Rockship, Texas, and they probably, every time they see me, say, oh no, here he comes. He's going to talk about reading at your grade level. Having 2 second graders, 3rd graders. I want them, when they leave us at 5th grade, not only to read at the grade level, I want some of them reading at high school level. And most of these kids are African Americans. And their parents come, they work with these kids, and by God, they're going to do that because we're focused on that and we care about every single one of those kids in that school. So I think it's a 2-way street. It's not, you're going to have to fix it. It's going to be, we are going to have to fix it.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. I want to push back a little bit on what you said, Alex. So 2 things. I think you asked a question, or you made a statement about the black pastor saying everything's okay. I think it's whoever is controlling that table, that room, I think it's important for them, if you have someone at the table that's telling you everything's all good, find somebody else to put at the table.
Right.
Right? And I think there's not a short list of folks willing to come and share their, again, Mayor, you stated it, right? Within the last 4 or 5 and probably a little bit longer years, there's been a lot of folks willing to step up and communicate to city council, which is kind of the focus right now, what we're talking about, have come down and made their voices heard a lot more frequently. But how often are they getting invited to that room across passes? I think the issue of Fort Worth, or the concern of Fort Worth in a lot of those rooms is pastors. And again, I'm a Christian, so I believe the pastors have a role, they have a place to play. But there's been a disconnect from the church and community, and they're no longer really speaking to the issues of the community. So every time you reach out to the pastor of the church to come and speak on behalf of the black community, you're missing the mark, right? And so you don't have enough people who are just grassroots level impacted everyday people in those meetings. And so if you're being told, and this can be for Mayor Parker now, or whoever else is in those leadership positions, if everything is okay, get that person out of the room. So that's one. And then the second thing I would like to kind of just address is, yeah, it's a 2-way street, but that 2-way street has had a lot of roadblocks and barriers for a particular side, right? And so if there's roadblocks and barriers, and it's been that way for the last, let's say 50 years, let's say 100 years, let's however far back you want to go, at some point I'm not going down that street any longer. At some point I'm going to turn my back on the other person that's coming down that same street, wanting to have the conversation, and I'm going to go another way. So I think you can't say that without putting everything in context, because the black community in this city, in this nation, is still getting shot and killed by a system, by people that's supposed to protect and serve, right? It's still being disheard. Again, if you look at the changes that's just happened to city council here in this city, to where they actually have stopped public comment. You can only do public comment, I think, once now, a month or twice. Twice now. They moved one of the meetings to the morning during a time which most working class people cannot make. So again, when you look at the changes that are being made to quiet the voices that have the most concern, that 2-way street, again, more barriers have been put up. You talk about what's happening on the county level. Right, that's another barrier that's been put up by a system that's not willing to hear from the people who are the most impacted. So if we're not having that conversation and those changes, yeah, I'm going to remove myself and I'm going to create my own table. And I'm going to have it with folks who are willing to have a conversation and move the agenda, move the needle, move the thing forward, because the communities of color, black and brown, but again, it's Black History Month, so I'm just stick on the black. It's missing, right? It's missing, and it's regularly missing. And so economics, jobs, workforce, the things that can change a community, education, right? You talk about rocket ship. My kids go to rocket ship. 2 of them do. The other one go to Young Women's. And so we see what can be and what can happen when you have leadership in place, teachers in place, where they're actually focusing on the needs of a community, the needs of a people. So the leadership is key, but also the system that's created is key. So rocket ship created its own system, right? So you don't have to answer to some of the same powers to be that would stop and put up barriers. Instead, it's a work on removing the barriers. So I'll stop there. I know you.
No, I want to get some of your questions and comments. Oh God, y'all got some too.
While you make your way over there, I want to say one thing about establishment as well, Barbara.
Go ahead.
I know some of you, and many may say, I am part of the establishment. I've made it, so to speak, because of the roles I've been in and whatnot. And I'm trying to make sure that I don't take that for granted, that I don't take that, that I don't neglect the opportunity and the duty and the responsibility to pay that forward and bring others along in their journey, which is why after 10 years of serving on boards and commissions, I said I need to let other people do this and pave the way for other people to do it. It's also why, you know, Dante's talking about communities of color. I don't speak for all Latinas or Latinos because that is part of my heritage. I'm also Black. I have come with a lot of different things to the table. I've had the opportunity because of the experience, education, opportunities all along to do what I've done. And I think that is one of the things that I try to day in, day out in the work I do, whether it's at Leadership Fort Worth, in the community with the Hispanic Women's Network, other volunteer groups, whatever, to not take that for granted. And I think that's one of the other things that Fort Worth, we still look at from a standpoint of putting people in boxes. And that you only, okay, you represent this or you don't represent that. And I think that is the other thing as far as when I look at this room, there's so many folks in here that are doing amazing things, but many of us could easily be considered part of the establishment. And so I think that's also something we have to be mindful of and aware of as we move forward.
In the spirit of making folks uncomfortable, I'm a newcomer to Fort Worth myself. Been here 2 years.
Welcome.
Thank you. Our city's getting over $400 million for infrastructure thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We're gonna need construction workers to build that infrastructure. Last night, Mayor Parker told me that she's trying to attract more companies to the city and trying to encourage startups to start here. That means we're gonna need high-skilled workers. How should the city approach welcoming newcomers like myself, especially after in 2017, the city did not sign on to a lawsuit sending the signal that immigrants can come here, but we're gonna ask for your papers. What kind of signal does that send?
There are other people. 2017, believe it or not, after COVID and everything else was a lump of fire. And the details on that lawsuit, I do know what you're talking about. That was the most misunderstood vote that ever was. And we did not ask people for their papers, nor did we arrest anyone, nor was that a part of the directive. Fernando knows that well, and it was not. As far as how the city welcomes newcomers, in a city, it's very hard. We try to get in touch with all our employers, get the information out on the city, because most people who come are working for one of our corporations. And try to encourage them to get involved. Try to get your churches to get involved. Neighborhood organizations, it's critically important that people reach out to wherever your neighborhood organization is, your child's school. You'd be shocked that less than 50% of our schools have a PTA. Isn't that an alarming figure? I will tell you, having raised 3 children and growing up in Fort Worth, PTA is where many people connected in the neighborhood get their start. Not just for your kids, but you just learn so much. But it's really hard, but it goes both ways. Newcomers have to be willing to reach out and engage at the city level too. And as far as recruiting more businesses, we do need to recruit business, but we must increase our workforce and our skilled workforce, and we've got to increase our education level. One of the big benefits is the new A&M campus that's coming in. It's going to help us with training for starting at the high school level and even reaching down, hopefully, into the junior high level and working on a path to help people get into skilled trades as well as engineering and research and development. There's a lot of work being done to include them, but in a city this big and this diverse, we've got so many people in North Fort Worth, far North Fort Worth, the Alliance Hillwood area, who are Fort Worth, but they consider themselves Grapevine, Colleyville, Keller.
Yep.
And that's very hard when you cross all the lines like that. But welcome, we'll put you to work.
As you go to the next question, but I just want to make one statement. So Fort Worth PD did ask for papers and did arrest many Hispanic migrant people on the north side. We've had forums and talked to direct people about those things when that happened. So I just want to make sure that we understand. So even though that was a part, from a council standpoint, it wasn't supposed to be a part of, I guess, that particular policy, it actually did happen. And so what happens up top doesn't always make it down to the bottom. I just want to make sure.
If it did happen, we weren't aware of it, with the exception of someone who was picked up with a warrant already. If you were picked up for a felony warrant or even certain misdemeanor warrants, you might very well, but the bulk of that was done at the county level in the sheriff's department.
Let me just say this about your question about recruiting businesses. Well, my response is they're here. They're already here. The city ought to do a better job of making sure that any building, any project that's being built in the city of Fort Worth, especially with city money, should have a representation of minority and women-owned businesses that are already here. Ed Bass, I did one of the departments that were reported to me when I was the vice president at TXU was real estate. And TXU had many real estate holdings everywhere. And I dealt with a lot of people from Dallas, all over the state, Secretary of State folks. And the best experience I ever had on a real estate transaction, and he did not get his way, was Ed Bass. You talk about a gentleman, fair guy. We tried to do the real estate transaction. It wouldn't work out for TXU, and he understood it, never complained, never tried to use his power, if you will. Great guy. But at the same time, if you go do some more homework and look at see how many minority and women-owned businesses help build Dickey's Arena, it may be in single digits. So they're here. And I would think if you're trying to recruit people, start here in City of Fort Worth.
Good morning and happy Black History Month. In the spirit of Black history, I think it was mentioned earlier on the panel that pastors in the Black community don't necessarily represent or speak for the Black community in some cases. That wasn't the case as a part of our history, as pastors were pivotal members in our community. Since that may have changed a bit over time, my question is actually an invitation for a brief discussion in where leadership here goes to specifically look for Black leaders to get involved or to speak on behalf of the Black community. I think Dante obviously has a lot to add, but I'd also love to hear from the other members there on the panel.
Actually, we're just going to hear from one. So which one of you want to take that question?
I can take it if you'd like. So, I took the reins of Leadership Fort Worth 2 years ago, and we have been fostering different partnerships because I don't want to do what I said earlier, make it transactional. So part of that's me and my team have been reaching out to different communities. So whether it's my friend Dante at Community Frontline, it's the Lenore Museum and the Tarrant County Black and Genealogical and Historical Society. It is the different groups within our own circles that we're reaching out to and going to different places, and also even by where we do our business. So it's not uncommon to see Leadership Fort Worth folks in different coffee shops all over town, for example. So I think that is one of the things that we have done as far as partnering. I think at the end of the day too, it also recognizes everybody has an agenda. It's kind of like what Alex talked about earlier. So whether it's churches, whether it is neighborhood groups, whether it's elected officials, myself with Leadership Fort Worth, we all are trying to do things for our organizations, but trying to do it in a way that is hopefully collaborative and is inviting other people to the table. And I think just even changing over leadership in roles. I think we see that in some of the longtime organizations across our community. Turnover can be a good thing because we bring those new ideas and perspectives and networks to bear. And so I think that's one of the ways that we're approaching it.
You just gotta reach out. You need to, if you've got a group, you need to call your council person or the mayor or email them and say, I want to be considered a resource. You'd be amazed at the number of people that we used to use, and neighborhood leaders too, outside of just the churches, who we used to get, who'd volunteer, and we'd call them and say, what's your interest and where would you like to serve?
Okay, keeping the trend, we're going to keep it real black today. Thank you all for your comments today, but Mr. Jimenez, real quick before I ask my question, I just wanted to make a comment to you that we do have to use the term racism because racism implies prejudice with a power dynamic, and we cannot ignore the power dynamic that comes with race. So my question is, I hear a lot of, when we talk about the Fort Worth way, a lot of people say Fort Worth is winning, but I'm a data person. When we de-aggregate the numbers and we look at subpopulations, can we say that Fort Worth is winning? Specifically, when we look at Black women, Fort Worth has one of the highest Black maternal mortality rates. I was scared to give birth twice. We also have epidemic with the police department. The murder of Tatiana Jefferson ended in murder, but the system that led up to that murder is not a one-off thing. I've had my own experiences. And so when we look at subpopulations like Black women, who are the backbones of our society, and we look at refugees and newcomers, what's the Fort Worth way for the vulnerable populations that have been here, instead of making newcomers feel comfortable in the new high-rises?
We don't have that much time to answer that question. Anybody want to take that just briefly, and we're gonna have one more question, then I'm gonna let you sum up real quick.
I'm not sure what the question was, but your comment about Black women having the highest mortality rate and infant mortality rate, unfortunately, is true. And it isn't just Black women. Fort Worth and Tarrant County have the dubious distinction of having the highest infant mortality and maternal mortality across all races. And there's a lot of work being done on it, and there's been a lot of work being done on women and infants mortality for 40 years. One of the first committees I was on as a community volunteer 40 years ago was through JPS studying it. It's a hard nut to crack, and it needs a lot of work. As far as Fort Worth winning, I don't know where you saw that. Yes, Fort Worth is winning in many ways, but that doesn't mean we don't have very significant holes to address also. You need to be winning in some areas, but you've got to be aware that you still have issues to deal with.
Going along with the Black History Month, I want everybody to know, before Dr. King, who else was the savior of Fort Worth? Does anybody remember? Does anybody know? Gooseneck Bill McDonald. Does anybody remember that? First Black millionaire in Texas. His savior, and gave his black bank, saved the white banks in Fort Worth. Therefore saving Fort Worth. Y'all need to know that story. I'm affected by the Fort Worth way. Let me give you a story. Fort Worth gave $4.8 million for a startup capital for a tech startup group called Techstars. Techstars is a world-renowned and accelerated program. Guess what happened? Fort Worth way got involved. Goff Capital and other groups got involved and forced it to be only for physical health only. I have a startup. I've had a startup for several years. The people that did that knew I had a startup. How many companies was started in Fort Worth from that? Anybody?
Not many yet.
Zero.
It's a growing project.
Zero.
A brand new project.
Yes, no companies were started here. That was deceptive. How much time? My point is very simple. It was a 3-year program. He could have cultivated our backyard. They didn't. That's deceptive at every single startup company or every single startup community in Fort Worth. So that's part of the problem. Second problem is this. The second problem is if you want to go see the greatest Fort Worth way racism in your history, go down Hemphill Street. Anzade over here in her group in your South Side, one of the greatest racist groups ever. Pushed 4 lanes to 2 lanes for bikes and did one thing, devalue the minority community. If they did over there, why did they do it to 8th Avenue? Because we are the minority community, we own our real estate, in our real estate, and we have no debt service. That's why they did it.
Thank you.
I want to say two, I know Bob's gonna wrap up, just two things.
Okay.
One,
No, we have, go ahead, Dante, and make this your closing statement. I'm going to give you all one closing statement because we are already a little over time.
okay, closing statement. So I just want to address a couple of things. So Community Frontline was founded and started because of a lot of what this young lady said here about the women in our community, specifically Black women, leading out, being a part of everything in every facet, right? So when you look at it, when you speak about Black communities specifically, right? Single parent household, normally it's the mom, and we said we wanted to do something about that because everywhere we went, we saw women in positions, speaking, leading, and so as men, we needed to come back and play a role in that and help push whatever needed to be pushed to help alleviate the sufferings of the community and things that were going on. And so it's not just and I want to say this too, because what happens until what the gentleman was saying is a lot of times when something is a Black issue, it becomes a minority issue. Like I would like to see as we move forward in whatever the Fort Worth way is, that we begin to break down those data numbers and look at who is it actually impacting the most? Who was it who actually began the conversation, right? And I'm not saying that we leave our brown brothers and sisters out, but when we talk about things that need to happen and things that need to change when it comes to the Fort Worth way, equity, inclusion, diversity, again, the Black community, when you break down those numbers, right? So she said specifically Black women, right? And the mayor then in turn said not just Black women, all women. No, but let's talk about Black women.
It is our issue,
right? When we talk about jobs, project, companies, construction, so I have a construction company. I know what those numbers look like in our city, right? And I understand, so when you talk about Dickey's Arena, yeah, minority number can look very different than the Black number. The Black percentage is oftentimes 1% or less here in our city, right?
Did you see who walked out when that conversation was had?
I did not, but what's up, Natalia? So I just think when we're having these conversations about the Fort Worth way, and as you guys begin to have these conversations kind of within your circles, like don't stop at the surface, right? Because there are people, you know, that are fighting, that are in positions, that are, again, you talk about establishment. I wanted to say this as I kind of wrap up. As I begin to, I guess, become known to whoever the who's who of Fort Worth was, I was told several times that, hey, you're being watched. You're being watched.
Yeah.
And my question was, for what? Because I'm not doing this for you to see me. I'm doing this for change. I'm doing this for my people. I'm doing this so that something actually happens. And I can care less, and this is an I statement, I can care less about those up top seeing me if those up top aren't putting into the community that needs it the most and actually causing change. And so I think that's what we have to really get to as a city, as a community, is actually not just looking at those of us in this room who could be establishment or connected to establishment, but push back on establishment and say, hey, don't just look at me. Yes, I can't help, but actually do the help with whether your time, your resources, your funding to impact change in our city.
Okay, Jennifer, a brief closing statement?
I'll try. I try to earn my brownie points at the beginning.
Okay.
I guess what I would say, and somewhat similar to some of the things that Dante is saying, you know, I'm not doing what I'm doing, obviously, to become wealthy, because nonprofit leadership is not. But I'm doing it to make a change. I want Fort Worth to be better for everybody in this room, everybody that's not in this room. Because so many people are struggling day in and day out. Fort Worth can be better, should be better, needs to be better if it wants to be truly living up to its full potential. And I want to be part of that change. That's part of my daily mantra of be the change you want to see in this world. What can I do today, tomorrow, to move things forward? Who can I introduce whom to? There's no point in me having this strong network of living and working in Fort Worth for 20-something years if I don't use it for good, if I don't introduce you to you so you guys can work on a project together, or make, an opportunity available to someone, or invite them to the table, to invite them to an event. I don't want to do this forever. I want other people to do it. And that's that kind of succession planning I want to see in Fort Worth, in our community. Fort Worth is a good city that has the potential to be great. And I hope that all of you are charged by that and inspired, hopefully, to do your part and think differently about, as Alex had mentioned, our own biases.
Okay.
And what holds us back.
Okay, Mayor?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said this morning, really good comments. And I applaud each and every one of you for being here and being willing. But we all have to do what Jennifer said, we all have to be a part of the change. I didn't get into this, I got drafted into politics, and I didn't get into it because I wanted to be an elected official. I got into it because this is my home, this is my children's home, this is my grandchildren's home. This will be your family's home for years, and we want it to be the best for everyone in our community that it can possibly be. I mean, it's an uncomfortable conversation in many cases, but you have to learn from it. And everybody has to understand you've got to reach out and be a part of that change. You can't just sit back and say, I'm gonna fuss about it and let somebody else do it. And the last thing I'll say, because a lot's been said and it's great, your biggest opportunity is one that in Fort Worth and Tarrant County has a history of being missed. There's another major election in May. And when we turn out anywhere from 6 to 9% of our voters, then those who are voting are the ones who ultimately have the biggest say-so. You simply have to take a little time, no matter where you are, and go vote, because you must get engaged and you must let your voice be heard.
I think this is, I hope some of you feel uncomfortable today. That's what I wanted to happen, and being uncomfortable is not a bad thing, and disagreeing is not a bad thing. I have a respect for everybody in this room. Probably don't agree with everybody in this room, but I certainly respect that you have the right to say what you want, what you think. I really do. But the mayor's right. I showed you my props. We're allowing this to happen. We're electing these same people over and over again, and they're not changing. They're going to tell you. I guarantee you, the person I was telling you that set some of these rules at the board, if they were to walk in today, half this room would get up and go hug and, oh, you're great, you're wonderful. And bullshit. They're not.
Okay, we're uncomfortable.
Dude, look behind the curtains. Look behind the curtains. And see, if this is what you want, you have the right to vote for that person. But if you want change, vote for someone different. Thank you very much.
All right, join me in thanking our panel, please.
And join me in thanking Moderator. He's always great. It's been a terrific conversation, whether we're uncomfortable or not, and I really hope we continue the conversation at the Fort Worth Report. We really focus on solutions journalism. We want to work toward a better Fort Worth, and whatever that means different things for different people. We have future Candid Conversations coming up. This only happens because we have sponsors. Jody Newton over here is our Director of Corporate Community Relations. So if you're interested in sponsoring a future event, please go see Jody or me. We also have coming up our second birthday bash. It is coming up April 12th, and we'll be sending out invitations to every member. And you can be a member very easily. Give $1. That's it, right? And we can help you do that. And that is how we, as a nonprofit, as a community-supported organization, that is how we exist. So I hope to see you April 12th at Hotel Dryce. You'll see lots of information about that. And our next Candid Conversation is on the Panther Island, another topic that makes people uncomfortable at times. So we'll be lining up panelists for that. But I just want to wrap up again. I thought our panelists were very brave and honest and fair and all the things. So I really appreciate each and every one of you, and appreciate all of you and all the support you've given to the Fort Worth Report already. So come on out to our offices over at 3008 East Rosedale, next to the subway, or come on by. I'll buy a black coffee, our favorite spot. So hope to see you and continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry.